Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP, joined now by Phil Wegmann. He is our White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. Phil, good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. So obviously, Phil, let's talk about the sort of bombshell news that broke last night, which is the pardon of Hunter Biden. I noticed that Karine Jean-Pierre did a gaggle on Air Force One today, and it seemed like, first of all, tell our listeners what a gaggle is. How many reporters were there? I only heard a couple of voices. Like, what is that? It's not your typical, obviously, full White House. This is on the plane. How many people are part of that gaggle?
So this is a little bit of inside baseball, but during that gaggle, while the president is traveling overseas to Africa for an international visit, there's probably maybe 10 or 15 reporters thereabouts, as opposed to a normal White House press briefing where you've got the entire press corps, 49 reporters sitting in each of those blue chairs, and it's on camera. That's the big difference here. The first we're hearing from the Biden White House after President Biden did something that he told us he wasn't going to do. First, we're hearing from them is while the president is on Air Force One headed to a different continent, and it's not on camera. Instead, we have only the audio. It certainly seems, a cynic could conclude that they dropped this news on a Sunday night and then they got out of town.
Well, and you can't tell who the reporters who are asking the questions aren't identified. They obviously pressed her on this issue and whether the Justice Department is politicized, etc. But look, in my opinion, listening to that gaggle, I would have thought there would have been more sort of outrage at her, directed at her, because she's the one who stood there day after day after day, and you posted a clip. You asked her. I think a lot of reporters in that room had asked her over time whether she was going to whether the president was going to pardon his son, commute his sentences, any number of things, and the answer was always no, 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 until you know until it wasn't no, which was the other
Mhm.
day. And she tried to finesse that. She kept referring back to his statement and said, look, he made this decision this weekend, blah blah blah. But there's really nothing different about you know what was going on then versus now. I'm just curious, Phil, as to the timing also. I mean, why would he not wait till the very end on his way out the
Mhm.
door as opposed to doing it now?
So the speculation about the timing is that Hunter Biden is likely to be sentenced in this case sooner rather than later. So instead of waiting until January 19th, or as the movers are packing up his personal effects from the Oval Office, President Biden decided now was the time that he was going to go back on his word. He was going to pardon his son. And let's talk about this pardon, by the way. It is very much the definition of a blanket pardon. It starts in 2014 when, surprise, surprise, Hunter Biden was in business with Burisma, one of these Ukrainian companies overseas, as well as numerous others. And it runs all the way until December 1st, 2024. That is about a decade. Some folks have noted that it's longer than the pardon that Ford offered Nixon. But if we just take a step back, I think on a human level, all of us can say, if our child was in this type of peril, of course we would pardon him. Of course we would show justice and, excuse me, show some generosity there. In this case, that's not the issue. It's not a question of a father looking out for his son. It's a question of why did the president repeatedly tell us that he wasn't going to do this? I mean, you noted it, Tom. Biden said to the press he wouldn't do this. The White House told all of us repeatedly that he wasn't going to do this. And then when there's no political consequences, when there's no votes to be lost over this, he immediately does what he said he wouldn't. And so you've got to ask, what value can you put in a Biden promise? The president often says that he gives his word as a Biden. Well, in this case, it's not worth the paper that his legacy will be printed on.
So president still has, he's obviously overseas for this trip, but he will be back and he still has 2 months left in office. I assume, Phil, will there be some sort of press conference, final press conference, exit, press conference? I think most presidents give one of those as their time in office winds down. Or is there any way that, you, meaning the press corps, will be able to question him directly about this and try and um, get him to explain himself more, and also get him to talk about why he decided to go back on his promise, his repeated promise. Is there anything on the books for that, or do you expect that?
I certainly hope so, because what we heard from Biden in making this announcement is that he believes that his son had been unfairly targeted by the Department of Justice, that things got political. And he sounded a little bit like Donald Trump when he was making that argument. But there needs to be some pushback here. There needs to be a question of, if this was in fact politicized, what do you make of the fact that there are whistleblowers who have said that the FBI slow walked this investigation into Hunter Biden, that there are whistleblowers who said that the FBI waited until the statute of limitations expired. That's got to be addressed. Another thing that has to be addressed is this reporting that we're hearing now from NBC News and others, that when the president was saying over the summer that a pardon was off the table, he was telling his advisors in private that it was very much a possibility. So how is he going to square that circle? I've got to say, though, after attending a lot of press briefings with this president, he certainly isn't as accessible as his predecessor, but more often than not, he gets himself into trouble. And I think that as he's looking to his legacy, there's going to be a little consternation among the people who surround him, because the two big career defining promises of this president in 2024 were, first, that he wasn't going to step aside. And then he did that. And now the second is his flip flop on the pardon. So there's a lot of questions for him to ask. I'm not certain he's ready to, perhaps take the risk of facing the press.
We're speaking with Phil Wegmann. He's White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. Phil, we got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about Biden and what he hopes to accomplish over the next, I don't know, 2 months that he has in office, basically. If you read the press, you'll hear and see that his administration is trying to Trump-proof some of his legacy items and make sure that, whether they're doing it through executive order or regulatory action, that they're trying to make sure that some of these accomplishments that he has had are protected from Donald Trump just walking in there and undoing them. What do we know about what Biden wants to do over the next couple of months before he leaves the White House for good?
The president wants to avoid the nickname that he's a lame duck. Like all presidents, obviously, want to avoid that. But the fact of the matter is, it's exactly what he is currently. There's no appetite in Congress to do a big push at the last minute. For the most part, the legislative business is wrapped up. They can look to different executive actions and orders to, set up speed bumps for Donald Trump when he comes into office. But, what I was struck by over the weekend is that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau comes to the United States and he flies to Mar-a-Lago to have dinner with President-elect Donald Trump to discuss trade deals and the threat of tariffs. He doesn't even bother to, maybe turn his plane around and head to, the Biden family home where they're celebrating Thanksgiving. He doesn't even make any scheduling change to maybe show up at the White House. For the most part, world leaders are signaling that when it comes to negotiations, when it comes to international business, they know that Biden doesn't really have a seat at the table in any meaningful way. And so they're turning their focus to Donald Trump. And I think that overall, that's what Washington, D.C. is doing.
All right, we will leave it there. Phil Wegman, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and that's going to do it for us. On behalf of Andy and Carl, I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. Everybody have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Good night.